Swale Siam Siayas. Eilatith. Good day and good morning, everyone. Lolahawk Laura Bucher Telsqui. I'm a river woman from Stalo Nation and also from Lake Babine Nation. Welcome to this podcast on the Good Medicine Songs. I'm your host. Today, we are on Semiahmoo territory and at the recording studio of Holly Arnson and Kevin Wright. Also joining today are Stalo, Halkomelem, language champions and knowledge keepers Hotwist John Williams and Teetlemspath Eddie Gardner. We are exploring the power of stories and songs to teach and transmit Stalo culture and knowledge. We are people of the river. The river and the people share the same name. In this episode, you'll be hearing a bilingual song written in Halkomelem and English. These songs were created by a team which included our dear elder, Dr. Siamia Tiliot Elizabeth Phillips, the last remaining fluent speaker of Halkomelem. This episode explores an important story in Stalo culture. But before we get to that, this podcast is looking at how our oldest stories on the river, our Swoquiam stories, are still informing us today. And I'd like to ask Hotwist, John Williams, what you think about why our songs matter.
Our songs matter as Swoquiam is our laws of life. Swoquiam is the law of the land. They teach us from right and wrong and good and bad. It teaches our children, how to grow up from a child to a man or to a woman. Teaches them to how to be a father or to be a mother. And so all our songs and all our dances, all our stories, when we sing these songs, our children get the morals of life out of them. They get the teachings of the land through a lot of our songs. They're able to connect to Mother Earth and just to be able to live a good human being. OCM.
OCM. Beautiful words, Hotwist. I'm thinking too of some of my favorite old stories, and the story of our first salmon ceremony and the return of our salmon relatives. Teetlemspath, I know you have a comment and a thought about that.
Yes, my Wilmot name is Teetlemspath. I'm Eddie Gardner. It's so good to be on this Semiahmoo territory. And we can feel the ancestors with us as we do this podcast. I'm always inspired by our connection to the ancestors. And when we sing our songs, we say that our ancestors come and they be with us. And that's really important because when we go out onto the land, when we connect with the water, when we visit our relatives like the cedar tree, we're blessed with some of the songs that come to us. And I found that out when I first came back to my homeland here, South Tamouch. I grew up in Quebec, and when I finally came back home and got connected with our culture, that's when the songs came to me. And that's because I was back in my homeland, living on the territory, living by the river, because we're river people and we're salmon people. And so when we get our songs, it's a true blessing because it connects us with our ancestors. It connects us with our Chacha Tamachtatal, our sacred Mother Earth. And when we get these songs, we share them, and there is a meaning, and there is a specific teaching that comes with the songs that come to us, and those songs come from the land, and the land. When we walk through our territory, we see the transformations that our great transformer made, Chachals, and the teachings that come with it. Help us to continue to honor the songs, honor the values, honor the customs about how we need to live together in a good way, how we need to take good care of everything that we have here. Osia.
OCM, thank you, Teetlamsbath. I'm reminded, Hotwis and Teetlamsbath, of so many times growing up as a little girl on the river and following my grandmother. And yesterday, I had an opportunity to go to one of my favorite places on the whole of our beautiful land, and that is around the curve of the river east of Mission, which is where I grew up, and where I walked all over that land with my grandmother. She was a plant woman. She taught me the stories of why the salmon are our relatives and why it's important to acknowledge and respect them as our relatives. They give so much. And yesterday, as I walked to the shoreline, usually at this time in October, the shoreline is full of the giveaway of the spawners. And as I walked to the river, you can always smell ahead of time the salmon that have given way. But yesterday, there was nothing but a clear breeze, and the sunlight was dancing off the cottonwood leaves, and the big cedars were swaying right by the river's edge. And there was no carcasses. There were no salmon anywhere. They weren't jumping. There were no animal tracks in the sand, in that clay. And Spacus, our eagle, was nowhere to be found. So I felt sad, but then I left tobacco because I could remember that Grandma always said to, ask and share with the ancestors. They will hear you. And so I apologized to our salmon relatives for the human error and all the things that are keeping them from returning in the great numbers back to us. So these good medicine songs are meant to lift us up. They're teaching stories. They're deeply, deeply connected to all of our teachings, and they are inspiring for the road ahead for all of us. OCM.
It just reminded me of the first salmon story from what was shared with me was, the first spring salmon, they call him a messenger fish. And when they came up one day, was the way it was told me, when they were swimming up playing and they seen all these people on the shoreline and through walking, and they were skinny, they were hungry. And so that first salmon went back down to the salmon people, and he asked them what could they do to help the people on top of the water. And so all the families got together, and they agreed to sacrifice their bodies to feed the people. And so they sent that messenger fish out to tell all the people how to make their nets and how to make their gaff hooks and make their all the tools that were used to catch the salmon. And so that first messenger fish went community to community, teaching all these to all the people. And then he gave a whole bunch of laws and for the people to follow. And he says, this is what you need to follow. So after you're done with that first salmon, that's when you have the first salmon ceremony. You bring back the bones back to the water, and once it goes back into the river, they're saying that those bones, once they start sinking, they turn back into the salmon, and then they go back home and wait till the next following year to come up. And I said that's the reason why we bring those bones back, is to honor them and to give them back, because they're going to transform again. And I said, it's as long as you follow all these rules, we'll keep coming back. And if once you stop following these rules and you disrespect us, we're not going to come back anymore. And so it's I reminded me of that, or what you were sharing, that there was nothing there, and to apologize for what the human has done. And it's because the people aren't following the rules that the salmon people left for us. And by not following, they're doing what they exactly said they're going to do, is not come back. I heard that story, and I kind of blended two of them together, because I think it's in comes from Kwantlen. One of the elders told it, and then I kind of blended it with our story up here. So I always make sure I acknowledge that story from Kwantlen, and that I did mix it up a bit with my own teachings from my grandmother, and but most of that is from that story that the elders told, and I always tried to remember the way she told it. And so it's to follow the laws of the salmon people, and that's why we brought back that honoring, or the first salmon ceremony, because it's where our people need to bring that back, and more people do, right, to honor their wishes that when they first sacrificed their life.
Thank you, Hotwis. That was a beautiful story, and a reminder of our deep connections, our oldest stories, how they are informing us, how we are given those laws, those teachings. Let's hear that Sacred Salmon Time story and song from the Good Medicine songs.
First off, introduce myself. Chatwis Telsquich, Telita Kwachiam, Eta Squelwell, Quells Maquitzlala. Chatwis is my traditional name. It's been handed down to me from my grandfather, my late grandfather, Samuel Tzit Ash. Albert Phillips handed it down to me in 1997. Before that, it wasn't used for 7 generations. And so today I carry that name with honor. My English name is Johnny Williams from Chiam First Nation. My grandmother is Siamia Tiliat, Elizabeth Phillips. And the story was shared with me from her and also from my mother. In the Stala territory of the upriver Halkomelem speaking people, there are teachings that have been passed down from generation to generation regarding the salmon runs throughout the summer and springtime. And so through the winter months is when all the families would pass down the life lessons of the teachings of the land. At the end of winter, when the snow is melting and the warmer weather has arrived, the people are watching for Kiachtalis, the Easter lily. And once it blooms, we use Apakam to bloom. Then it is known as, at this time it's known as Timswiwa, the Ooligan time. So all the fishermen would go down to Stalo, our river, and wait for the Swiwa, the Ooligan. The people then would have a feast and started to preserve the Swiwa, the Ooligan, also known as a candlefish. The Stalo People of the river would use the dried swiwa as torches for when it is dark through the long winter nights. The Stalo would also bury them to create oil, then use that oil for cooking. Tim Swiwa Hooligan time is short, so the Stalo would, they would try to get enough to last a year, because once the first Chalak Tishwachwas, the eyes of the thunder are opening, or the thunderstorm comes, it is known that the Swiwa are gone out of the river. Once the first thunderstorm is done, the Stalo would finish with the preservation of the Swiwa. And not too long after this, the Stalo would notice that the pipahum, the cotton from the chawosp, the cottonwood, they're starting to fall. And when you see the pipahum, the cotton, it's falling and it looks like snow. At this time is when we call it Timklechel, the spring salmon time. And that's when we know that the spring are in the river. And so the fishermen would go down and they would get, catch our first salmon, and then we would have another feast. The whole community would get together and have our first salmon ceremony to honor the first salmon. All the Stalo would eat together, bring it, and then after they would bring the bones back to the river and plan the fishing trips. After the feast, all the families work together to hiluchstuch, get the nets ready, because there will be a long trip up to the canyon to prepare for the Timstaki, the sockeye time. Once the nets are ready and the Stalo made it to the canyon, they would build their dry racks and hang the staki to wind dry them. This would preserve the staki for winter. In Hulkamelam, wind dried salmon translate to skela or slitzis. This is some of the teachings passed down from the ancestors and shared with the Stalo people. If we respect the Chayachatamuch, the sacred land, and the Stalo, the river, Mother Earth will continue to take care of her children. These are the teachings that have been shared to me by my grandmother, Siamia Tiliot, Elizabeth Phillips, Sisetla, Vivian Williams, my mother, and my late grandfather, Samuel Tsittash, Albert Phillips. OCM.
He looks strong, stocky Abby. He looks strong, stocky Abby. Get your nets ready, Sockeye coming. Stocky Abby, Sockeye coming.
The spiritual guide for the Good Medicine Song Project is my good friend, Siamia Tiliot, Elizabeth Phillips. Siamia Tiliot is the last remaining fluent speaker in Halkomelem. She made a promise as a little girl at the St. Mary's residential school that she would not ever lose our Halkomelem, our river language. And she has kept that promise and has lifted up a whole community, a whole nation, with her dedication and teaching of our river language, Halkomelem. She gave her blessing to the project and oversaw the translation of the lyrics of our Good Medicine songs from English to Halkomelem. And we're here this morning with Tim Kiapi, good French vanilla coffee, and an old-fashioned donut with Siamia Tiliot. Hey, what a wonderful day we've had, Siamia
Yes.
Tiliot.
Allo is well.
Tim
Yeah.
Tim Kiapi.
Oh,
Tim Kiapi. Oh,
Tim Kiapi.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good day for autumn, isn't it? But this is actually a new season, and we call that season.
And we had our New Year, of course. I guess you know that.
Yes, we had our New Year last
I
month.
didn't know what day, so when I was talking to the Great One, right on Thanksgiving,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
this is,
Yes.
I'll say it's the beginning of the First Nations New Year. Yeah.
One of the things about this season is it's still not too late for our dog salmon to come up, is it?
That's what a lot of people are smoking. That's what it's for.
Right
smoking.
now. Oh yes.
Yeah.
Grandma and Mom, and Auntie, that was it. That was the best. For smoking was that dog salmon.
Yeah.
But our salmon. You have better memory about the abundance of salmon, our relatives coming up here.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And now look at we're trying to call them home, and they're in peril, aren't they? Really, they're not coming home, and this year, we had to do our own first salmon ceremony. COVID was here, and
Oh yes,
so,
yes.
I took salmon bones down with salmon I had around that time, and so I apologized to the salmon relatives for we're in COVID and we're not gathering and just
like
apologizing.
how we usually do. And another thing, like when the men went to our like up at Yale to our fish camp.
Yeah, the fish camp.
You know, and the men usually teach their sons. You know, like when my husband told the sons, you know, like when they pull in the net and take out the first one, and it happened to be a spring, and you know, and Albert didn't prepare the sons. He told the son, put it back into the water, and they almost refused to do that.
Because they didn't know that.
You got to give it to
back.
the river.
That's right.
The river. We are river people.
We are.
So you honor the river by giving your first salmon.
That's right.
So,
Oh
yeah.
my! So they had all that work. They brought in the big spring, and then what do you mean?
Put him back.
Put it back.
Especially when he's still alive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So he's fighting, you know, fighting, and they finally get him out,
him in there.
and then to put him back in.
Dear. Oh boy.
Yeah, right now, Hotwas is at the island getting clams and oysters and
Beautiful.
all that
Mussels
that the ocean has to offer
Yeah. Yeah.
for our winter.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we can only keep going and remind the young ones to have hope, and we all need to work together to turn this around for our salmon. It's going to involve everybody, isn't it? Everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
All people. Yeah. I want to thank you for holding our language, our river language, Halkomelem.
Oh.
Been a warrior for us, and so many younger and middle ones. They're picking up the language now.
They sure are.
Oh.
It's just such a wonderful sight to see. And that's just a few
I know.
on Zoom.
Yeah, few
Yeah,
ones
a
are-
lot of them can't be on. Yeah.
You know, I love that story you told me. Being in town, and there was a young person who said "ace whale" to you.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And it was like,
over by Seiwan.
yeah.
Yeah, just going by, and he
Yeah.
recognized me and said ace whale, and just lifted me up
Oh,
beyond.
I know.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you've given so generously, and it's paying off in so many ways. It continues. You know, people are so inspired by you. I'm inspired by you, and cherish our friendship. And wow, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Quite
Yeah, yeah. I always thank Lawicton and all the elders that I used to be with. Yeah.
That was a
Yeah.
pretty special
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
if you hadn't come together at that time, there would have been no language revitalization at all, or a writing system.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
more Kiapi another time.
Yes. Yes.
Yay.
Hey.
Quit
Yes,
aside.
quit aside.
Thank you. Quit aside.
Olahak.
Siam Utilia. Now we're going to listen to the audio glossary. that will help us learn how to pronounce the Halkomelem words in the song lyrics. First, you'll hear Dr. Siamia Tilliot, Elizabeth Phillips, say the Halkomelem word, and then you echo. Then listen to Titlimspath, Eddie Gardner, say the same word, and you echo again.
Oral Glossary, Tim Chacha Stakwi, Sacred Salmon Time.
Papakam.
Papakam.
Easter lilies blooming.
Tim Swiwa.
Tim Swiwa.
Ulakan time.
Chalak Tishwahwas.
Chalakt te Shwahwaz.
Eyes of thunder opening.
Pipahwam.
Pipahwem.
Cottonwood is snowing.
Tim Tlchil.
Tim Tlochhiel.
Spring salmon time.
Hilokstuch.
Hiluk Stuch.
Get your nets ready.
Staki. Ami.
Staki Ami.
Sockeye are coming.
Holly Arnson and Kevin Wright co-wrote the Good Medicine songs with the Stallo team. I'd like to welcome you, Holly A. Swale, to this podcast.
Little hawk.
Oh, it's so good to see you.
It's such a pleasure to be involved in this. And this is how we came to know each other, was through this project. And it's been an amazing experience. When we started into it, Titlimspath, Eddie, he defined the 4 stories that were going to be the foundation for the 4 songs. And then all 6 of us, Siamia Tilliot, Elizabeth Phillips, Stalamathet, Ethel Gardner, Titlimspath, Eddie Gardner, Hot Wes, Johnny Williams, Kevin and I, we all gathered together in the beautiful studio of artist Gary Hagquist. It's called Forest Echoes, and it's on the mountain slopes in that beautiful forest that goes down into Cultus Lake.
Now, which season did you gather to do this beautiful co-creation of these songs?
That happened in June 2019. Mm-hmm. And the project had been 6 months in development before that. We wrote a grant application to the First Peoples Cultural Council back in the fall of 2018. And then we gathered together in June, and we thought, we'd never done it, so we really didn't know how long it was going to take to write these songs. But the amazing thing was they just rolled out. Within 3 days, all 4 songs had been mapped out. This song, Tim Hahashtakwi, it started out in one form and it wasn't quite working. And then we heard one of the songs that Johnny and Eddie were singing, and we thought, oh, that's a beautiful chorus. Whoa. And the song flowed out from that. And what I love, what touches me about this song is it's talking about the life cycle ecosystem events in the Stallo territory that people observed, and when they saw certain things, then that is when they knew the Ulakan were in the river, and that's when they knew the spring salmon were present. And it makes me remember the natural world around me, and to observe what's happening, and to remember that wild salmon are so important to all of us, especially those of us who live in cities and we aren't next to the river and we're not seeing the salmon. So I'm very grateful to be involved in this.
It's beautiful, and that the uplift of the lyrics of the song, you feel like you're swimming along with salmon, with our wild salmon. Can you share a little bit about how, when you made that adjustment together on that song, did Siami Atiliot's eyes just light up?
That was the process.
You're right.
There'd be a line put out there, and it'd go round the circle. And Stalamathat Ethel Gardner, she would say, "Well, what about this?" And Eddie would say something, and then Johnny might say something, and then Siami Atiliot would go, And as soon as she said, we knew, okay, that's it.
It was perfect.
We've arrived.
You've arrived,
so cool.
Is right.
Yeah.
It's a process that has a magic all of its own, doesn't it? You needed to be in the mountains, you needed to be on the land, and the good hearts and minds came together in such a quick, creative way.
And part of the uplift is the intent of it. And the whole intention is to create these songs and to be offering them out into the world. It doesn't really matter that you're not a Halkomelem speaker. It's fun to learn another language. Mm-hmm. And the profound part of it for me is just understanding the ideas behind the stories and the phrases.
Beautiful story. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to welcome Dr. Marvin Rosenow. He is a fish scientist who teaches at the British Columbia Institute of Technology. I asked Marvin to discuss the Western science information that is connected to the Indigenous worldview communicated in the song.
The lower Fraser River downstream of Hope and in Stalo territory has many runs of migratory fishes that go through this area over the period of a year. Some of these iconic species include the Chinook salmon, also known as the spring salmon, and sockeye salmon. The Ulashin or Ulagan, which is a smelt and is migratory, is also a keystone species in this area and is well respected by First Nations and other groups of people. In regards to the salmon species, there are many runs of sockeye salmon that swim through the Stalo territory, and some spawn far upriver, such as in the Stewart watershed. But some migrate to the local areas such as Chilliwack River drainage and the Harrison River and its tributaries. Sockeye migrate through the lower Fraser River starting in June, and these are normally the upriver stocks, and then the species finishes off sometime around October for the lower river populations. And some of these are in Stalo territory. The earliest runs are the most prized as they are the fattest and richest, as they need the nutrition for their long migration runs. Chinook or spring salmon are also found migrating through the lower Fraser River and can be found spawning in nearby streams such as the Harrison River, but as far upstream in the Fraser as Rearguard Falls in the main stem near the Alberta border. I've been told that there are Chinook salmon migrating up the Fraser River every month of the year, but the earliest that I've ever personally seen them is in February, and that was a long time ago. I don't know if any of those are still around. The name spring salmon refers to a component of the run that ran through the area and quite a ways upstream during the spring months of the year. The DFO Albion chum salmon test fishery used to catch Chinook salmon into December. Like sockeye, the earliest and most upstream running Chinook salmon are the fattest and the richest because they need the nutrition to get up to the farthest upstream reaches of the Fraser River watershed. Historically, the Harrison River Chinook salmon run in Stalo territory was very large, maybe even exceeding 500,000 fish per year as recently as half a century ago. This run has now collapsed. Ulagan, Thaliacthes pacificus, is a smelt, and it is also migratory from the sea and spawns in the Fraser River main stem downstream of Hope. It is a very rich fish and is important as food for both natural ecosystems, including mammals such as seals, in addition to the sometimes massive white sturgeon that also lives in the lower Fraser River. Seagulls and humans and all sorts of other creatures that live in the area would be feeding on the Ooligan as they spawned. These spawning runs would have been massive prior to the European settlement. Ooligan usually max out in size at about 20 centimeters, about 8 inches, and they're very oily and very nutritious. And the species first comes into the lower river during the springtime, thus provides some of the first good food after a winter period of sometimes hard to find nutrition for animals and humans. The runs of sockeye salmon and Chinook and Ooligan have declined precipitously over the last several decades. All three species are only a tiny remnant of what they were even several decades ago. It is one of the biggest catastrophes. The salmon run declines in the Fraser watershed is one of the biggest ecological catastrophes in the history of modern Western Canada. And Ooligan have also collapsed, and this has been very profound. While habitat damage continues to be prevalent in regards to salmon and over-harvest sometimes occurs, it is clearly the ocean survival that is the greatest influence on these species. My view is that multiple lines of evidence indicate that the impacts associating with fish farming and the smolt outmigration passageways north of Campbell River past the Salish Sea is likely the reason for these Fraser River collapses. Ooligan have also collapsed in the lower Fraser River. For Ooligan, there are two issues that seem to be the most profoundly deleterious to this population, that being the extensive dredging of sand for navigation downstream of New Westminster that started to occur in the 1970s and really took off in the 80s and 90s. And the second issue is the large bycatch of Ooligan in the marine environment and the prawn trawl fishery off the coast of British Columbia. And this has expanded over the last several decades and is coincidental. The increase in that fishery is coincidental with the collapse in the Ooligan runs in this in the lower Fraser River.
The next song, an epic title called Up Your Watershed, was written by Holly Arnson and Kevin Wright. Here's Kevin to tell us more about the song.
We wrote this song back in 2009 when the sockeye stocks crashed in the Fraser River. Scientists were predicting that 11 million sockeye would return, and less than 2 million showed up. It was a pretty big crisis, and that's when the government put together the Cohen Commission to find out why the runs had declined. So this song, Up Your Watershed, asks the question, where are the sockeye? Now in 2020, less than 500,000 sockeye are predicted to return to the Fraser system. So we have a lot of work to do to restore these precious runs. Here's a performance from 2014 with our band The Wilds and hundreds of local school singers at the Jubilee Auditorium in Edmonton.
All right, everybody up on your feet. Woo! Come on! Yeah! Redbacks cruising up the Fraser River. And the pinks are doing it too. Fighting their way
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Your voices now can share the knowledge of sacred salmon time through songs and through stories. Thanks also to the University of the Fraser Valley for their generous support of this podcast. And now, Siaya's dear friends, be well, take care of each other, and long live our wild salmon. Quetz Lama, see you soon.
This Good Medicine Songs podcast is hosted by Lola Hawk, Laura Bucher, with spiritual guidance by Siemi Ateliot, Elizabeth Phillips, with Teetlimspath, Eddie Gardner, Hot West, Johnny Williams, scientist Dr. Marvin Rosenaw, and singer-songwriters Holly Arnson and me, Kevin Wright. We wish to give special thanks to the Squaw First Nation for their support in bringing the Good Medicine Songs to life. The Good Medicine Songs podcast is produced by the Artist Response Team. To find out more about the Good Medicine Songs project, please visit artistresponseteam.com/goodmedicinesongs.